Okay, welcome to the final GoTo session for this month. We're in week 4, so yoo-hoo, right? We're nearing the end. If someone in the chat can verify, my screen is showing, right? I hope this time, unlike last week. Okay, good sign. You probably have recognized, if you haven't figured out already, that week 4 is pretty light, and it's purposely light. I mean, you have this GoTo session to watch and to take a quiz over. You have to make sure that you're keeping up with the month-long McGraw Hill grammar activity. That's due Sunday night. Sunday night's the last day of the course. But otherwise, you pretty much have the week free because by design, I want you to work on your final project, the actual PSA, which for this course will take the form, of course, of a video, a podcast, a song or jingle, a video game, a comic, etc. So we've cleared out space for just about all that. I've responded to all of your essays. I do apologize. It took me a little bit longer to get through the grading. I really don't have a good excuse except that I was just overwhelmed with grading, and I spent a good portion of the weekend, even though they're technically my days off, grading your papers. Uh, but hopefully everybody's gotten those and has read through the feedback and has enough time to sort of work on the best PSA they can possibly produce. And I've tried to adjust when I graded the essays, I tried to adjust my feedback accordingly. So, for example, I didn't encourage anybody to completely start from scratch, or this is. I mean, I tried to work within the parameters of what people gave me. By the way, a lot of the essays were strong. I mean, I think it was one of the stronger batches I've seen, and I'm being honest about that. I know I push people hard, especially in the early weeks. I'm very, very picky about you have to have topics that are not just industry related, but pretty specific, and that you have to have a clear message and a clear stance, right, that you're encouraging a specific audience to take. And I know I drive people pretty hard on all that, but I think there's actually kind of a good reason because then when it comes essay time and when it comes PSA time, I really do get pretty strong efforts from people. Like I brag to the other instructors that because they'll sometimes complain, "Oh, my students aren't doing it." I say, "I don't know what your problem is. My students, they're doing awesome work. They're writing pretty solid essays and they're putting their best foot forward on the PSAs. So keep that up." Okay, so this is mostly about just some reminders about what you need to do for the final project. It's all listed in the assignment sheet, but because I know that not everybody reads through those as thoroughly as they can, and to a certain degree, I get that. You should be reading through all materials, but a big thing here at Full Sails, we try to deliver information in lots of different ways. So I do try to cover lots of things in the go-to sessions. But for the final project, there are some pretty important reminders because students can mess up pretty badly, typically when they hand in things that are incomplete. But before I get into the specifics of the assignment, I do want to talk a little bit about editing versus revising. So I know we only have 3 people in the room, but like in general, when you hear the word editing, what does that mean? Or okay, I have 2 words up on the slide: editing and revising. Like, what's the difference? Let's begin with editing. Like, what is editing? And we kind of got into this. Well, I don't want to give away the answers, but we kind of got into this a little bit last week during the go-to session that was blacked out for half the session. But in general, like, what does editing make you think about? Any ideas? Zachary says, depending on the context. Okay, true. But here I'm looking for a pretty simple answer, which I think James is getting close to answering. Yeah. Making simple changes. Remember last week I had that one of your quiz questions dealt with high order concerns versus low order concerns? Editing tends to focus on the lower order concerns. Making sure things are spelled correctly, making sure the commas are in the right place, all that kind of stuff. I mean, listen, Zachary's right. Editing, in the grand sense of the word, includes much more than that. When we talk about editors who work for book publishers, I mean, yeah, there's proofreading, but editors do more than just that. And of course, revising then sort of suggests I've kind of given the answer away, but revising is much bigger. Okay, it's not fixing little tiny issues here and there. It's really kind of looking at the thing globally and deciding what needs to be done. And this is important because remember, you're not handing in your essay again. Your essay is done. Yeah, Zachary makes a good point. Editing is typically more about structure and revising is about content. And content is important because you're done with your essay. I mean, in a traditional English class at a university or a community college, you typically follow a format where maybe you write a paper, you get feedback, you revise it to the best of your ability, and then hand it in again as, I don't know, part of your final portfolio or something like that. But here, you're done. So now it's time to focus on the public service announcement, which means focusing more on revising. It's not that editing isn't important at all. Most of your PSAs will deal with text that appears either on the screen or in the comic, or in the script that you hand in. So you do want to make sure that you're trying to follow as best as you can the rules of grammar and punctuation and capitalization and all that. But mostly your attention is going into the big picture stuff, revising. And here, revising really has even more importance than it does to, for example, revising an essay, because here you're revising it in a completely different form, which means making choices. Last week I showed the final project option sheet, and if you remember, like the video it should aim for 1 to 3 minutes. Same thing with the podcast. Right there are certain kind of length requirements. I mean, it's okay if you go over a little bit if the content's really strong, but mostly we try to put people within those limits because there are very few PSAs out in the real world that go on for more than 3 minutes. Even that Sarah McLachlan, incredibly sad commercial slash PSA that you see on television all the time that seems like it's interminable. Like you'll check out what's on another channel, then go back, and Sarah McLachlan's still talking with the sad dogs. Like I don't even think that's longer than 3 minutes. It feels longer, but it's not. So it's really a lesson in conciseness, selection. Not everything that you covered in your essay can possibly fit in the PSA, so you'll have to decide which facts are the most important to stress. You might bring in new elements if they weren't covered as strongly in the essay, maybe emotional appeals, things like that. I mean, you'll have to carefully select among your content to create the best PSA possible. Okay, so we're choosing a completely different format to deliver the same information, and that requires making lots of choices at the revision level. I can't remember if I said this in another session, but the goal here is not just to hand in your essay again in a video format or a podcast format. And believe it or not, I get students who do that. Students who will just turn on the microphone on their machine and start reading their essay aloud, or pretty much reading their essay aloud. But that's not a podcast. Or they'll turn on their laptop camera and just start speaking away, essentially reading their essay. But that's not a film. So yeah, there are lots of choices you have to make in order to move your topic to a new format. Thomas says the PSA should sound like a real world PSA. Yeah, that's what we're aiming for. Like I realize that you're not all professionals in your industry, but the goal is to produce something that's at least imitating or conceptually is trying to reach those same sort of standards. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. So revision is big here, and that's why. That's my next picture here. The house that's being constructed. Like you have to build a new house. You already built a house called the essay. Now you got to build a new house, which is actually your actual PSA. And if you look at the word revision, notice that it has that word in there, vision. So here, revision is really working overtime because you have to completely, not rethink your material, but decide carefully how it's going to be reassembled, edited, put together for a professional level PSA. Next, peer feedback. I still need to. I've taken a sneak peek at what everybody's been saying to each other, but I need to still grade the peer review process. Do the people here who are in attendance, did you all get feedback? Is there anybody who didn't get feedback? I know that sometimes, even though I encourage people to make sure that people who haven't received a response get a response, not everybody does. So Thomas says, yes, you got a little. Okay, Zachary looks like he's good. Hopefully you got some useful peer feedback. I know that there are lots of limitations, like, well, it depends on whoever is responding to you and the overall effort that they put into it. But you have peer feedback and you have my feedback, and I don't want you to completely ignore what your classmates have said, if you think there was something particularly useful. I mean, a big part of this process, not just as a writer, but in general, is to decide what sorts of feedback makes sense and which parts don't. I know as the instructor, my feedback tends to have a little bit more weight. Uh, but if there's something you take issue with or disagree with, you'll have to figure that out on your own as well. But the important thing here is to consider all the feedback, including those from your classmates, because believe it or not, I shouldn't say it that way because it makes it sound like it's surprising that students could have terrific feedback. Like you guys sometimes say things that I didn't notice. Like I try to notice a lot of things, but sometimes I either miss stuff or maybe it's just a case where, one of the members in class just focuses on something that I didn't pay as much attention to. But when I see it, I realize it's equally as important. So make sure that you're reading through what your classmates said in combination with what I did as well. James says that he didn't get any. Yeah, I've got some. I have some sort of comments to make about that. I know people were supposed to post. I mean, according to the guidelines, people ideally should have responded in a kind of reflection-like way once they got their feedback, and I know that not everybody got some, so I'll just adjust accordingly. You'll have to trust me as an instructor that I'll grade your participation as fairly as I can based on what's in place. So as long as you responded somewhat in depth and with some effort to another person, you should be fine. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misread, James. You're saying that you saw that some people didn't get any. So here comes quiz question number one. I think. I think that's on the next slide. Yep. Okay. So by the way, the quiz question this time very easy. So quiz question number one isn't even really a question. A. Summarize your classmates' feedback. Okay. You don't have to write like ad nauseum, but give me a somewhat understandable and specific summary of what one of your what whoever just chose to respond to said. Okay? If you didn't receive any feedback, summarize my feedback. On some level, I want to make sure that people actually read through the feedback. I know it's shocking, but you'd be amazed. Some people never go back to the discussion board to see what people have written. It's not often. It's only, I'd say, a few people. But yeah, I think that's it's a little bit sad. I always love getting feedback. So, yeah, summarize your classmates' feedback. Or if you didn't receive any, summarize my feedback. Okay, and we're moving. We're moving. Here's quiz question number two. So they're coming fast and furious. How will this feedback influence your PSA project? Okay, and again, if you didn't receive any feedback from peers, well, then how will my feedback influence your PSA? And be specific. Some people were kind of rushing through some of the questions last week, and that's partly my fault. I could have been more detailed about what I expected in terms of quiz answers. But I want you to start already thinking. If you know that you're going to make a film, hopefully you already have a strategy in play for I don't know what the concept is going to be, or if there's a storyline, what the story is going to be, or how you think it's going to come together. And so, how will the feedback influence you, either in small ways or larger ways? Okay, so lots of people got feedback. So, what will you need to adjust or change given that feedback? I need to move the control panel out of the way because I forget that people who watch this session afterwards, sometimes the control panel for the GoTo training session blocks information on the slide. So I'm just going to let it linger for a few more seconds and we'll move on. Actually, I'll move on because they can always pause the video. Okay, so let's get into issues of citation. We've already talked about APA format pretty in depth in week 2, but we need to revisit it again because if you're using images or music, they need to be cited, and they need to be cited in APA format. So I'm going to go over citation in general and then specifically what to do with images and music. Is there anybody in this room who thinks they're going to be using images or music? And by the way, when I say images and music, I mean allowable images and music. I'm not going to call the person out by name, but there was already someone actually not just one, I think there were a couple people in their quiz answers who were like, oh yeah, and I'm going to use these contemporary songs to highlight what I'm talking about regarding the music industry. And, I find the kindest way to say it, but I had to say, you're not going to do that. I'm sorry, but no. Um, I can't remember if I said this in another session, but I love the new Taylor Swift song too. I think it's awesome. Shake It Off. What else is on the charts now? Iggy Azalea, the song of the summer, Fancy. Great song. Love both of those songs. I don't want to hear them in your PSA though. Okay, so no copyrighted material can make your way into the project. Allowable images, allowable music, yes, but we can't just take like film clips from major motion pictures or yeah, the music that's well known. Even if you think it would be a cool soundtrack to your project, that's a no-no. James says he'll need to get some sound clips to set the mood. Yeah, so think about what I covered last week, like the Westar Music Database, which I'm going to return to in just a second, uh, to show where you can get key information in order to cite things properly. But the importance of citation, okay? I'm just going to breeze through this because I think most people get it. But A, it's a requirement for this course. Most importantly, yeah, you need to give credit to those who have helped you create your project. And that means on any level. It means the research you did for your essay, and in some small way, or maybe a large way, that helped inform your PSA. So those things need to be cited. And yeah, if you use images or music, even if it's allowable, you still need to give credit. Um, and finally, yeah, others might find your sources useful. This maybe applies more like on the essay level, but students are often surprised because students write their papers, they hand it in, they move on to the next task. I get that. But like because my area is more in teaching and academics and research, like I find sources when they're cited incredibly useful. I mean, I found so many things just by browsing through the lists of what other people have listed in their references. So yeah, those are. And by the way, you should kind of take a moment and maybe not memorize, but look at what's on this slide because it will come up perhaps in a quiz question. Okay, so it's a requirement for the course. By the way, it's also a requirement for Full Sail in general. Um, it's funny. I was just having this exact same discussion. Actually, Thomas asked a great question. I'll get back to in two seconds. But this came up today in today's digital literacy GoTo session because I also teach DGL. Because we were discussing issues of copyright, and we talked about the ideas. I only mentioned Taylor Swift because she's got like the number one song in the country right now. But like, is she really going to come down on you because she's heard that you're using her song in your project for an English class at Full Sail University? Probably not. She could care less. But still, it's more about kind of teaching these sort of industry standards. Most of you are going into fields where copyright issues are going to be important. If you're in graphic design, if you're in film, if you're in music, you're not going to be able to just take whatever you want, right? Uh, wow, some people lost audio. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, it's back now. Good. I don't know. I got no warning on my end that there was something wrong. But okay, we're in business. I'm going to keep moving forward. I think I was just making the joke about how Taylor Swift could probably care less if you used her song in one of your projects. But the importance is that we're trying to preach the lesson about copyright, that you're heading into industries, right? Film, music, etc., where you just can't take whatever you want. Graphic design, and sort of grab whatever you like and use it without giving credit. So we're trying to teach those sorts of lessons early. So if it seems like we're a little bit rigorous and a little bit intense about copyright, it's just because A, it's a university wide rule, and B, we're trying to teach people something about the industry. Okay, so keep these in mind. It's required for the course. It's good to give credit to those who have helped you, and others might find your sources useful. Okay, citing music. Here's the cool thing, and I'm going to show you how to cite images in just a second. If you need to take a screenshot of this slide, you can do so if you think you're going to have to cite music at some point. But really, it's if you notice, even though it seems like there's a lot of complicated information, it's really following the same principles as the APA stuff I mentioned in week 2 for handling with articles, right? So instead of an author, we have a songwriter, we have the date, we have the title of the thing. Instead of a publication title like Time Magazine, we have the title of the album, and so on. So here's oops, I didn't mean to go forward a slide. Go back. Here's here's something from the Westar Music Database. Okay, this is the composer's name. There's the title of the track. There's the year. Um, Actually, hold on. Instructor made a boo boo. I can fix that. Okay, there we go. Right. So composer, date, title, title of the album, um, publishing company, and I think I forget who said it. Someone here said that they will maybe be using music in their project. Does that apply to anybody else as well? James said it. Let's see who else is here. Thomas, Emma has joined us. Zachary, Thomas thinks he will. Okay. And by the way, if you have any ideas where you'll be getting music from aside from Westar, you should probably let me know. Oh no, I can't get in. It probably has something to do with the storm. It's pretty bad here in Orlando. I hope I'm still connected. People can still hear me, right? Okay. Let me try one more thing and then I'll give up and move on. Let me see if I begin the process all over again. Oops, that won't do it. Full Sail Connect. Hmm. Okay, it doesn't like me. So just trust me. When you go into the Westar Music Database and you go into a specific category like rock music, or they have all those fun titles like corporate rock or I don't know techno. Um, like the tracks actually have titles like Letting Loose, and if at the top of the page there's actually it tells who the composer is. There's a year. I think the year is actually at the bottom of the page. I just use the title of they have a like a generic album cover within whatever you've clicked in, and it usually has like I said a really corny title like rock action and emotion. But I just use that as the album title and just put Westar Music Publishing. Citing images, same concept. Okay, we may not have a literal author, but we do have a photographer. Or if it's a photographer using a goofy kind of online moniker, just use that. So if someone calls themselves Hot Mama 1977, I mean, use that as the name of the author. And again, we're following the same principles that you've used for citing articles, right? So author, year, title of work, if one is provided. We typically put in brackets photograph, so we understand that what's being cited is a photograph, and then just a retrieved date for when you actually accessed it. And here's an example, okay? So this is the person who took the photo, year. This photo had a title. I labeled as a photograph, and then I just put the date, retrieved April 16th, 2014 from blah, blah, blah. Now let me see if my other websites are working. Oh, I don't think I ever got back to Thomas's question. He was talking about royalty-free music. Yes, royalty-free music is fine. It's weird how I've just talked about these concepts today with my DGL class, but royalty-free is actually not free material. For example, compfight.com, which I introduced last week, which is a Flickr search tool for finding images. This is a Creative Commons site, meaning you can just find things that are free and allowable to use. You still need to cite it, but it is free and allowable. But if you notice, there's this dotted line here. Let me see if I can make things bigger. Right? Anything above the dotted line is actually just a promo. It's trying to get you to another site. I think it's overstock.com. And you can see professional stock photos from $1. That's because these are royalty-free images. Don't be fooled by the word free. There's nothing free about them. All it means is you pay the one-time charge for the photo, and then you own that photo. You own it, and you can do whatever you want with it. I mean, sometimes there are some restrictions, but in general, the way it works is it's yours to use. You want to use it in your company's brochure, you want to use it in some other profit-making venture, that's fine. If you want to use it in a non-profit way, for example, in your schoolwork, that's fine. You pay that one-time charge, and it's yours to use as many times as you like. I mean, you don't technically own the image, but you pretty much do. Okay? So yeah, royalty-free stuff is perfectly fine. But I still want you to cite it. Below the dotted line in compfight.com is all the free stuff. So I did a search before we began the session on puppies. So let me just click on a puppy. Oh, they're all so cute. I don't know which one to choose. Let's choose this guy here. Okay, and let me resize my screen. So here's the picture of the dog, right? I can download the whatever size of the file of the image I want. But the important thing here is that within the HTML, you can kind of see the URL. So I'm just going to copy it, put it into my browser, and then I get the details that I need. Okay. So here's the author's name. You kind of have to hunt for some of the information. Clarabelle is the photographer. It was taken in 2009. They've kind of restructured the site, at least Flickr, because it used to be that all the information was here on the right in a really easy to read way, like the photographer, the title, the date, and now you have to hunt around for it, and it can be a little bit confusing. Like I think this might be the title of the photograph, but I'm never entirely sure. But you'll have to do a little bit of hunting down for information. But at the very least, you have the most basic information, like the name of the photographer, the date it was taken, and with that information, you have enough to do this. Okay. At the very least, you should be able to find a photographer's name or username, the year, and you'll be able to put in the retrieved on such and such date from, and then include the URL. And again, if you think this applies to you, if you think you'll be citing images, you might want to take a screenshot of this slide real quickly, just so you have it to use later. Okay, quiz question number 3. Why is it important to cite? I sort of gave you the answers. Well, not just answers, but I gave you the hint to the question earlier. There was that slide where I listed three reasons why, at least here in this course, it's important to cite. So what were those things? Let me take a sip from my water. Okay, so now we're kind of we're winding down. I only have maybe 10 minutes more of material to go through. So, like I promised, this session will be a little bit shorter today. Now we need to remind you what you need to do for the final project, because every month, despite the GoTo sessions, despite my loud pronouncements, there are always one or two students who just hand in their PSA and nothing else, and there's more required for this assignment. So we need a quick reminder of what that is. So I've already brought up the assignment sheet. Hold on. Okay, you can read through most of this on your own. It's due Sunday of week 4. Okay, so that's this Sunday. It's worth 15% of your grade. Yes, the PSA is important. You need to get that to me. And again, I think I mentioned this last time, but if you're doing a film or video, most people end up rendering it and uploading it to something like YouTube or Vimeo. People who are doing comics, if they're hand drawing it, they usually scan the finished product at a certain point and upload it to an image hosting site. Some people use comic generators, do the same thing. Powtoon is kind of its own beast, but I think there's an option there too where you can publish on YouTube. If you're writing a song, most people upload to SoundCloud, which is kind of like the YouTube for purely audio files. I'm trying to think, did I leave anything else? Same thing for podcasts. Podcasts with the other one. The gaming people, I think we have one person here who's creating a game. I'll just need to speak to you, Thomas. Personally, if you have questions, I just need to get your file. Okay. Usually it's just a matter of me being provided with a link that I can click on that takes me there, either the SoundCloud or YouTube or an image hosting site, what have you. Okay, James is the one I was thinking of. RPG Maker. Okay, so yeah, I'm trying to think. It's been a long time since I got a game submission. Usually there's like an executable file or something. And I believe on that final project's option list, we talk about the video game thing. In the past, we actually had people create games, and the games function as a PSA. Now we offer the opportunity of the person who creates the game to sort of play it for us and record it if we can get the gist of your public service announcement that way without having to play it directly. Not that I don't mind playing your game, but I remember last time I had a lot of fun poking poking fun at the past games that I was getting frustrated because I kept wandering into the wilderness and dying when I didn't want to fight monsters. I just wanted to see the person's public service announcement. So James, maybe we'll have to talk a little bit more um, on the side. Yeah, Thomas asked a good question. Like, if I mean, I'd be happy to play through the game if it's simple enough and it's easy enough, and I can see your PSA clearly. If not, there's always the option that you can use screen capturing software to just capture you doing a kind of walk through the game, but making sure that it's clear enough and slow enough and complete enough, in your opinion, so that I can evaluate it. So those are kind of your options. But back to the basic information. Okay, so it's due on Sunday. It's worth 15% of your grade. I need a link or something that gets me to your actual project. But there's also a 250 word reflection that you have to write. So it's like a mini essay. 250 words roughly is about a page double spaced, so it's not terribly long. Don't freak out. But okay, what do you put in this reflection? Well, it's here on the right side of page 1 of the assignment sheet, which is why in this case it's pretty important that you look through the assignment sheet. I know that my previous GoTo sessions cover things pretty thoroughly so people get the gist of what they need to do. Or, for example, I model things on the board, like in week 1 where I posted my own introduction paragraph. But here it's pretty important that you open the assignment sheet because the content of your reflective essay is right here. Okay, you have a series of questions that have stars next to them. And it's basically, they're questions designed to get you thinking about the course overall for the month. So, what were you expecting from English this month? Did this class meet your expectations? How did your project evolve over the weeks? Basically, how did things change from week 1 until now? And you can keep on reading the others on your own. Which assignment was most helpful? What advice would you give to future students taking the class? The gist is reflection, and I want to make that clear. This is not the space to complain or praise about how much you love or hate this class or how much you love or hate me. Not that I have a problem with that, but you have a separate activity that's designed entirely for that. Okay, it's called the student course evaluation. There's an activity on your board that if you want to, you can complete, around the time the course ends, where you can give your opinions to your heart's desire about what you loved about the course, what could be improved, what you didn't like, etc. This is not the space to do that. So the emphasis on reflection. So the core parts are that I need a link to your public service announcement. I need that reflective essay. And we give you steps to follow in the assignment sheet, and I'm also going to show them on the slides for the PowerPoint presentation. But, we give you what... Okay, it tells you what to do. Right? Step 1, open a new Microsoft Word document and create a formatted APA-style cover page. This should be easy because you already created one for your essay. So just use the same thing. I mean, if you want to give it a new title, like My Final Project or something like that, or maybe you have a specific title for your public service announcement. I mean, update things. But in general, you have the template already established. Step 2, upload your PSA to an appropriate file sharing website. Okay, Vimeo, YouTube, SoundCloud, etc. And copy and paste the link to the project in your Word document. Be sure to include your written script or lyrics. Okay, unless you're creating a comic, because in a comic the words are already part of the project. Everybody else needs to submit a script. Maybe the gaming people don't. I don't know. I have to think about that. I'll have to talk with James and see to what degree his... I'm guessing that it would be more like a comic in which whatever text is part of it will be included in the game, but just in case, I guess I'd need to know more. But all the rest of you, if you're creating a film, if you're creating a podcast, if you're creating a song, the song will have lyrics. I need the script and I need the lyrics. In part because if it's a song, lyrics help me follow along more easily. For a film or a podcast, A, I have some writing that I can evaluate. And B, I do like to see some evidence of planning. Like I sort of joked at the beginning of the session, I don't want to see people just turning on their microphones and reading their essays out loud. I don't want people just turning on their camera and winging it for a minute and then calling that their PSA. So the script is also some evidence of planning on your part. So that needs to be included unless you're doing the comic book option and perhaps the gaming option. Okay, and then you'll include a references page for any outside material used. For some of you, you might just be copying and pasting your references page from your essay. I would improve and fix the issues with APA that you had, if you had any. Uh, but essentially, you'll be just copying it over to this document. If you use images that come from outside or music from something like Westar or royalty-free music, you'll need to add those to your references list. But I need that references page. Even if you're not adding things, just take your references page from your essay and put it together. Okay, so that might seem like it's overwhelming. Like I just listed 10 million different things. The good news is you have this as one of your downloadable assets, which is a model of what your final project should sort of look like. The text is mostly missing, so you'll have to imagine it with the text in place. But for example, here's someone's cover page, right? Second page typically looks something like this. Link to the project, so I could just click on your link and it will take me there. If you need a script, your script will go here. And please, to the best of your ability, try to follow the same APA guidelines that we just learned about in terms of spacing, in terms of paragraphing, etc. I know that lyrics are a little bit different. I know that some people's script may take the form of dialogue, especially if you're creating, say, a podcast where I don't know, two people are going back and forth in a radio style discussion, or even a film if you have characters playing different roles. But do your best, okay, to make the script presentable and look nice on the page. Then comes your references page. And here, what I've done for you is also reminded you of the different kinds of file types that exist. So here's an example of an image, a photo entry. Here's an example of a sound file. This one was taken from the Westar Music database. And then you have a more traditional source here. So if you're confused, if you think, oh, I remember he talked about images and music in that GoTo session, but I'm too lazy to go back to the GoTo. I shouldn't say lazy. That sounds harsh. But actually, no, lazy is the wrong term because it's a pain sometimes to go back to a video file, right? And find that exact moment where I talked about something. So if you don't remember the specifics, you can always look here for a sort of reminder of what you need to do for images and music. And then on the final page, your reflection. Again, follow the same sort of APA guidelines. Actually, this needs to be bumped up, I think. I was playing with this document earlier and some things got out of whack. But okay, right? Same rules. So reflection, center type of the page. And oops, only hit return once. And then we start typing away. My reflection, on and on and on, okay? So, I mean, you have this example to look at to model what you need to do. But the most important thing is not to leave out any parts. It's really, really sad when I have to take off 20 points because, oh, the PSA is here, but there's no reflection. Or there's a PSA and there's a reflection, but there's no script. Okay, so make sure that you have all the pieces in place. I don't think it's terribly difficult. I don't think it's really asking for that much. I mean, the biggest thing maybe you have to create in addition to the PSA is that 250 word reflection, but make sure that you have all those pieces in order and handed in on time. Okay, so final quiz question, which is reflective in nature. Okay, how will your final project show your development as a writer during the month? And again, I want you to be specific. Don't just say, oh, I learned so much and the final project taught me the value of life. No. I want you to, you don't have to write pages and pages, but spend, 3, 4, 5 lines. Well, three's too few. 4 or 5 lines explaining kind of like what your project shows about your development. Maybe you were sort of lost early on in terms of the importance of focus or topic selection or thesis, and you think your final project, or maybe you've learned a lot about the editing process or revising process. I don't know. By the way, don't use any of those answers because I don't want you just mimicking what I said in the session here. But really kind of speak to me honestly about how your final project shows your development this month in the course. Whew, I think that's it. Questions about the final project, about its requirements, about the PSA, I mean, I'm hoping that everybody's just moving forward just fine on those projects. But if you do have questions, you can ask them now, or you can save them for, I wanted to say offline, but I guess I should say off session. You can always send me a message. Yeah, James, feel free to. I don't know how you want to do it. You can send me a message, and we can play message tag back and forth, or we can set up a time tomorrow to talk on the phone or through iChat. Um, yeah, some of you might need some more uh, direct and personal feedback, and that's cool. But everybody else is feeling okay. We got Daniel, the late arrival. Emma's been quiet. James, Thomas, Zachary. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording to this session right now.